Well, I don't know if any of you remembered it was Grandparents' Day before you got here, but surely you do now. And so I'm going to share a little bit of history, very little bit of history about Grandparents' Day. I don't think I've ever shared this part before, and I found it on a site that I'm going to assume is accurate because it sounds right. In 1969, a 9-year-old little boy sent a letter to President Nixon suggesting Grandparents' Day. However, he was told that proclamations are ordinarily issued only when there's a congressional resolution authorizing him to do so. Hence, Marion McQuaid was recognized as the founder of National Grandparents' Day when President Jimmy Carter signed the proclamation into effect in 1978. And we are blessed to have many awesome grandparents right here for us to celebrate. And so we have some candy for you along with those stickers. You want to pass it out?
Sure.
And you can take this stork top off there and pass the box along with it. I told him I was bringing the stork with us. Pass the little box, will you, too, please? Because on the back of the box, it has the different kinds they are. If you would particularly like a certain flavor, you can just give her the box, and then they can take their time looking it over. And there are going to be at least 2 each, even if you're not a grandparent.
This is
okay.
authentic stork glass, by the way. It has a stork on the top of it. It was
Look
given
at
to me as a gift.
Happy Grandparents' Day. So I'd like to share, while the candy's being passed around, a couple statistics about Grandparents' Day that I found extraordinarily interesting. 4.8 million preschool children in America were cared for by a grandparent in 2011. So these are a little outdated. I bet it's a lot more than that now. 24% of grandparents are taking care of children that are under the age of 5. Now, with anybody caring for grandchildren or children at all, we know it can be a lot of work. So imagine under the age of 5. Ooh, to have that energy, right? 58% of grandparents care for their grandchildren simply because they enjoy doing it. More than half. That's amazing. And many of you will recognize this one. 52 billion is the amount that grandparents spend on their grandchildren in a year. $52 billion grandparents spend. So I bet some of you are a part of that too.
Seems kind of conservative.
Maybe for today. So truly today is the talk title, We've Always Done It That Way. And I'm going to jump right out on a limb and say, if you ever say that, we've always done it this way, maybe it's time to awaken to a new idea of how to become, how to do it. Science of mind is often called simple but not easy. Simple but not easy. In fact, some believe it's so simple that it's hard to grasp. And so it's not easy, but the teaching is actually very simple. And the way to utilize the teaching is through practice and consistency. So the idea that thoughts create things. So what happens when we pray and when we actually see that our prayers are being responded to? We must remember to become aware of that occurrence, and we also must be aware to be grateful for it, to not get complacent in the practice of knowing that my thought is creative and so I just move along my way, but rather always feeling so grateful for the opportunity to see answered prayer. But what about when our prayer seems not to be working? Sometimes we might wonder what we're doing wrong and how to make it right. Ernest Holmes wrote and lectured a lot from 1927 to 1940, and he wrote a lot about what science of mind is and how the principles and the processes work in our lives. He wrote about how to use it and apply it in life. And he identified two main factors that are really important for us to delve into, and they are fear and faith. I'm going to share a quote from him, and it is a lengthy quote, I'll tell you right up front, but I always look at his quotes and try to decide what I can take out, and I decided nothing. This is incredibly awesome. Worry, crisis, and anxiety seem to plague most people, often to the extent that life is something to be suffered through rather than to be lived with joy. This does not mean that we shall ever be free of all problems, but rather that life and living present a continual challenge, which we should learn to master instead of allowing it to master us. I'm going to repeat that part even. We should learn to master instead of allowing it to master us. No one imposes fear upon us. Rather, we create it for ourselves in our own thoughts and emotions. What we need to realize is that we have just as much freedom to eliminate fear as we have in creating it. And that, I would say, is true for everything. That there is an obvious need to secure our freedom from our self-created and self-imposed fears is found in those sciences which deal with the mind and the body. Any evidence of fear in our thought, whether it is large or small, can have a subtle and far-reaching consequence. You can find a freedom from fear, and you can discover the ways and means to achieve more of what your heart desires. The journey can be made, the goals can be achieved, but it is something that no one else can do for you, for the attainment rests in the processes of your own thought, or processes of your own thought, our own thought. Those words come from a booklet called Living Without Fear, which is purchasable if you're interested. And those words are from pages 3 and 4. In the booklet, Ernest Holmes talks about how scientists comprehend all that life is by observing effects and reasoning out what must be the cause of all that life. Observing effects and reasoning out what must be the cause of all that life is. It always goes back to first cause and our personal relationship with God. So the answer to how does it seem to not be working is, as always, it is working. So sometimes we just are not working it accurately. How do we work it accurately? We may not be applying principles in a manner that reasons out what cause produces what effect. What cause, which cause will produce the effect that we desire. We must see deeply into how effects are caused by understanding first how first cause operates. God is always here. We must use our mind according to its own nature. So we must use first cause, use mind, use God according to God's nature, not according to our own idiosyncrasies or perceptions or limited belief thinking. If we want to change an effect in our life, we must back it up not only to what did I do to cause it or what did someone outside of me do to cause it, but how does first cause, how does God operate? What is its nature that would create this effect that I desire? And that, my friends, is what we're talking about when we say it's really very simple. It's just not always easy. And it does take practice. It takes never giving up on whatever it is you desire. Remember my story? I know I've told it so many times, but I think it's one of the most powerful ones of my friend who said, will you please treat for me for men because I'm just not doing very well in that department. And she really wanted a relationship. And so I said, absolutely. And I treated really well for about a month. And one day I was driving to work and I was thinking about her and thinking about this, and I went, oh my gosh, she doesn't want me to treat for men. She wants me to treat for a man. The treatment shifted. According to the way law operates, she is now married. Now, I don't know if you knew that part, because she might not have been when I told the story before. So, Ernest Holmes says, just as there are laws of matter, so there are laws of mind. For what is true on one plane is true on all. This, no thinking person can deny. If certain factors in physics produce certain results, then certain mental factors will produce certain results. This is a field, now remember, this was written a long time ago. This is a field for exploration and experiment, as yet almost entirely untouched. And still, I would say, we probably haven't, because when we have really worked this principle in our lives and uncovered so many of our personal belief systems that are resistances to the good that God is, we will be living in a world that works well for everyone, that is attainable. He says, yet in the laboratory of mind lies a possibility of research as fascinating as that in the laboratory of matter, with undreamed of potentials awaiting discovery. Often when we first begin attending Science of Mind, we start practicing with this phenomena and seeing parking places or a paid bill or whatever it might be and going, oh my gosh, this stuff really works. And then we just get on with our life. What about this stuff really works? It really works, but we have to work it. And it's amazing, it's an amazing process, and it's always true, and it keeps us from blaming anything or anyone outside of ourselves, because we realize that it's my thought that is creating my life. And so if I don't like something in my life, there is a thought that needs to change, and it needs to change how? It needs to change so it is allowing the divine nature to create the cause and effect. And actually it's pretty fun to work in the mind of the laboratory of our own mind.
So how is your mind working for you? Are you actually creating all you wish to manifest in your life? Are you bringing all the good that you wish to experience? Even as recent as this morning, mine wasn't. And Deborah had to hit me with a cosmic 2x4 to remind me of all the good in my life. And so, thank you, Deborah.
Sure.
It doesn't always work, even though we've been in this teaching for quite a while. It doesn't always seem to sink in those moments when we wish it would. I remember a long time ago, before I was even in New Thought, I remember somebody telling me one time, I think it was in a church board meeting of some other spiritual tradition, where they said that the death toll of any church is when people say, but we've always done it this way. When we don't allow ourselves to grow and expand. And I was thinking about that earlier, and that's one reason why I came up with this title. We've always done it this way. If you ever find yourself in a rut and you can't seem to get out of it, it's probably because you've always done it that way and you are not looking at the infinite realm of possibilities, that another idea where you can actually choose to go. I came across this story. I'd read it a long time ago, and I thought it was so relevant to today. The U.S. standard railroad gauge, the distance between the rails, is 4 feet 8.5 inches. Now that seems kind of like a strange number, doesn't it? 4 feet, 8.5 inches. But all railroads are built 4 feet, 8.5 inches. So why is that gauge used? Well, maybe it's because we've always done it that way. Well, it's because that's the way they built the train tracks in England, and England engineers designed the railroad system in the United States. So why did the English build them like that? Because the first rail lines were built by the same people who built the wagon tramways, and that's the gauge that they used. And why did they use that gauge? Because the people who built the tramway used the same jigs and tools that they used when building their wagons, which used the same wheel spacing. And why did wagons have that particular wheel spacing? Well, if they tried to use any other spacing, the wagon wheels would break more than often on some of the old long-distance roads in England, because that's the spacing of the old wheel ruts. So, why did they build those ruts in the roads? If you've ever seen an old road, they have ruts going where the wheels of the wagon would follow and go in those ruts. Imperial Rome built the first long-distance roads in Europe, because you know all roads lead to Rome, right? Those roads have been used ever since. And what about the ruts in the roads? Well, Roman war chariots formed the initial ruts, which everyone else had to match or run the risk of destroying their wagon wheels. Since the chariots were made for Imperial Rome, they all were alike in the matter of wheel spacing. Therefore, the United States Standard Railroad gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches is derived from the original specifications for an Imperial Roman war chariot. Things never change, do they? So why were the chariots designed with that strange space? Roman army chariots were designed just wide enough to accommodate the rear ends of 2 war horses. So here's another twist to bring it into the current times. When you see a space shuttle standing on the launching pad, there's one basic fuel tank, and on either side of that are 2 solid rocket boosters. And those rocket boosters are made in Utah. And the engineers would have preferred to make them a little bit bigger, but there is a railroad that goes between there and here, and it goes through a tunnel. And that tunnel is slightly larger than a railroad. And of course, you know that a railroad is built 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. So therefore, they had to be built that size to be able to fit through the tunnels to get to the launching pad. So you can see that a space shuttle design factor is determined by the width of 2 horses' butts. So it leads us to that, a moral of the story is that horses' asses control almost everything. Or we could say, but we've always done it that way. For a play on words. Well, I like the idea that if it works, don't fix it. And I know when Deborah wants to rearrange the furniture, paint the house, or do home projects or whatever, I always say, well, I kind of like it the way it is, because I'd rather sit on my butt and watch television. But at the same time, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And so I'd like to ask a question, how's that working for you? Are you able then to expand? Or are you just always getting what you've always had before? I like the phrase that you don't drown by falling into water, you drown by staying there. Activity in our lives is important. Rumi said this, and you're going to love this. Rumi says, stop acting small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. I'm going to put that on the refrigerator. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. Stop playing small. You're never really stuck. You're never really in a rut. You're just committed to certain patterns of behavior because they helped you in the past. But as you've evolved, they no longer serve you maybe the way they used to. In fact, they may be more harmful than helpful. The reason why we can't move forward is because we keep applying old formulas, old patterns, old ideas to a new level in our life. As we have a new view on life, a new worldview, we have to shift all the old things that worked with the old pattern to create something new. To change the formula, you have to change the formulas to get a new result. Einstein says, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. And he means you must keep moving forward, always moving forward. Troward and Holmes and several other people tell us that the purpose of life is to constantly moving forward, growing and expanding in our consciousness, constantly growing. We have to constantly be moving to do that. And don't look back, because you're not going that way. You're always moving forward. I read this wonderful quote this week that says, "Only as high as I can reach can I grow. Only as far as I seek can I go. Only as deep as I look can I see. Only as much as I dream can I be." When we think about expanding our horizons in terms of expanding our reach, we think about the physical limitations of how far I can reach my arm. Can I reach the ceiling even on my tiptoes? Not quite. But we're not talking about physical growth. We're pretty good at that usually. We're talking more about spiritual growth, expanding our thought processes. Remember that there are 1,440 minutes in a day. This is similar to what Wayne was talking about earlier today, which means you have 1,440 chances to do something different to change your life. You have 1,440 chances in a day, scaled down to a minute, to shift the way you think and to shift the way you live. It may not be easy at first, maybe a challenge, but if you're not a little bit uncomfortable every day, you're not really growing, because all the good stuff is outside your comfort zone. If you're going through a metamorphosis, sometimes that means everything in your life has to change. If you want to stop being a worm, what do you call those things? Turn into a butterfly, caterpillar, wandering around in your stomach, and turn into a butterfly and fly through life and explore life more expansively, you need to go through a metamorphosis. Sometimes that requires a lot of shifts, a lot of ideas in your mind and in your physical experience to actually make that happen. Mark Twain says, I love Mark Twain, 20 years from now you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than the ones you did. I had an old friend recently who told me that I no longer get extended warranties on things because what's the point? They're going to outlive me anyway. So maybe some of us aren't even thinking about, well, I think just about everybody here is probably thinking 20 years in the future. I would hope so. We may still be around. But back to Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than the things you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.
Awesome. Thank you. You should have given me that really awesome quote. I would have put it on with my lengthy ones that I'm going to give to you. And so, looking at that idea of we've always done it this way, we can continue to do that, or we can open up to the field of infinite possibilities and try it another way. I'd like to close today with words from Ernest Holmes, as he said we should try this experiment for ourselves. So I invite you to close your eyes and get comfortable if you're okay with that. And he said, "I am now convinced that the ultimate power is goodness. I am equally convinced that anything in my present experience which is not of the mixture of this goodness is the result of misconceptions on my own part. Furthermore, I am convinced that through the reversal of my thought and the changing of my concepts, my whole eternal life can be rebuilt, recreated. From now on, I only affirm the positive and disclaim and repudiate but not combat the negative. I shall no longer resist evil, but I shall embody only good, which overcomes all unlike it. I have neither enemy nor enmity. I shall entertain neither in my thought. There is nothing working against me. Everything is for me, and all apparent contradictions to this truth shall vanish as the mist before the sun. And so it is.